Lowe's knows how to get you ready for holiday hosting with up to 35% off select home decor. And get up to 35% off select major appliances. Plus, members get free delivery, haul away, basic installation, parts, and a 2-year Lowe's protection plan when you spend $2,500 or more on select LG major appliances. Valid through 10/1. Member offer excludes Massachusetts, Maryland, Wisconsin, New Jersey, and Florida. Installed by independent contractors. Exclusions apply. See Lowe's.com for more details.
Come to DSW for the shoes, stay for the fun. Because, let's be honest, if shoe shopping isn't fun, are you even doing it right? So go ahead, try something new. Try something different. Good different. Try something that feels like you. You know, the real you. And then definitely brag about it later. Because at DSW, you've got unlimited freedom to play. Find the shoes that get you at prices that get your budget at DSW stores or at DSW.com. Let us surprise you.
This is SpaceTime, Series 28, Episode 111, for broadcast on the 15th of September 2025. Coming up on SpaceTime, discovery of potential biosignatures on Mars, an atmosphere discovered on the frozen distant world of Makemake, and a total lunar eclipse wows half the world. All that and more coming up on SpaceTime.
Welcome to SpaceTime with Stuart Gary.
Scientists with NASA claim that samples collected by the Mars Perseverance rover from an ancient dry riverbed in Jezero Crater might be the best chance yet of discovering preserved evidence of past microbial life on the red planet. A report in the journal Nature claims the samples, called Sapphire Canyon, were collected from a rock named Chiava Falls last year. And the study's authors believe these rocks could contain potential biosignatures. A potential biosignature is a substance or structure that just may have biological origin, but requires more data or further study before a conclusion can be reached about the presence or absence of life. Sapphire Canyon is one of 27 rock cores which Perseverance has collected since landing in Jezero Crater in February 2021. Now, as we reported on this show at the time, Perseverance came upon Chiava Falls back in July last year while exploring the Bright Angel Formation, a set of rocky outcrops on the edges of Neretva Valleys, an ancient river valley measuring some 400 metres wide that was carved by water rushing into Jezero Crater long ago. This new paper represents a peer-reviewed study of those original results. It's basically saying, yeah, you could have something there. Perseverance's scientific instruments found the formation's sedimentary rocks were composed of clay and silt, which on Earth are excellent preservers of past microbial life. They're also rich in organic carbon, sulfur, oxidized iron, in other words rust, and phosphorus. Chiava Falls is an arrowhead-shaped rock measuring about 1 metre long and 60 centimetres wide. As they were examining it, scientists noticed what appeared to be colourful spots. Now, the spots on the rock could have been left behind by microbial life, if that life had been using the raw ingredients, that is the organic carbon, the sulfur and the phosphorus in the rock, as an energy source. And when the scientists gained higher resolution images, they found a distinct pattern of minerals arranged in what are known as reaction fronts, points of contact where chemicals and physical reactions occur. This pattern has been named the leopard spots, and it carried the signature of 2 iron-rich minerals, vivianite, which is a hydrated iron phosphate, and grigite, which is an iron sulfide. Vivianite is frequently found on Earth in sediments, peat bogs, and around decaying organic matter. And importantly, here on Earth at least, certain forms of microbial life can produce grigite. The combination of these minerals, which appear to have been formed by electron transfer reactions between the sediment and organic matter, is a potential fingerprint for microbial life, which would have used these reactions to produce energy for growth. But the thing is, these same minerals can also be generated without the presence of life, including sustained high temperatures, acidic conditions, and binding by organic compounds. However, the rocks at Bright Angel don't show evidence that they've experienced any high temperatures or acidic conditions, and it's unknown whether the organic compounds present would have been capable of catalyzing the reaction at low temperatures. The discovery was especially surprising because it involves some of the youngest sedimentary rocks that Perseverance has so far investigated on Mars. Earlier hypotheses have assumed that signs of ancient life on the red planet would be confined to older rock formations. But this new finding suggests that Mars could have been habitable for much longer periods of time, or alternatively, much later in the planet's history than previously thought. And that the older rocks may also hold signs of life, but signs which are simply much harder to detect. Acting NASA Administrator Sean Duffy says the findings are the closest scientists have come so far to discovering life on Mars. Duffy says the identification of a potential biosignature on the red planet is a groundbreaking discovery and one that will advance science's understanding of Mars.
For the last 30 years, NASA has been exploring Mars. And in that exploration, we're looking for signs of life, we're looking for water, but 30 years of exploration. And in the past, we thought we found signs of life. And when we did that, we put it out to the scientific community. And the scientific community would come back and say, well, listen, there's different explanations for what you think was life. It actually was created by something else. And that's been the history, the partnership that NASA has with its discoveries and the scientific community that will, in essence, pressure test what we think we've found. So we're talking about Perseverance. This was a mission sent to Mars under President Trump's first presidency. And a year ago, we found a sample, and it was, again, we're exploring in places where there were rivers and where there were lakes. And much as on Earth, we think that that's where we'd see signs of ancient life on Mars. And so a year ago, we thought we found what we believe to be signs of microbial life on the Mars surface. And so we put it out to our scientific friends to pressure test it, to analyze it, and go, did we get this right? Do we think this is signs of ancient life on Mars? And after a year of review, they've come back and they said, listen, we can't find another explanation. So this very well could be the clearest sign of life that we've ever found on Mars, which is incredibly exciting.
The study's lead author, Perseverance scientist Joel Hurwitz from Stony Brook University, says the combination of chemical compounds found in the Bright Angel Formation could have been a rich source of energy for microbial life. But he adds that just because they've identified all these compelling chemical signatures in the data doesn't necessarily mean they really had a potential biosignature.
We really used every scientific instrument available to us on the payload to investigate these rocks and really try to tell or paint as complete a picture as we can of what these rocks are made of, the environment they were deposited in, and how the interesting features that we see in them might have formed. And what we saw in this rock were these layers of very fine-grained, rusty red mudstone that had in them these incredible features, these things that we took to calling poppy seeds, which are the sort of dark black spots in the rock, and leopard spots, which are these kind of ring-shaped features that have dark rims around them. These textural features told us that something really interesting had happened in these rocks. Some set of chemical reactions occurred at the time they were being deposited. And so we really wanted to understand what those reactions might have been. And one of the things we wanted to ask ourselves was, is it possible that organic matter might have played some role in the generation of these textural features? So we turned to our organic chemical detector, the Sherlock instrument, and trained it on this rock. The data that we got back from the Sherlock instrument was fantastic. It's a set of spectra that are called Raman spectra. And there's a lot of information on these graphs, but the key thing to take note of is the fact that what we see in these spectra is something called a G-band. The G-band for us is a smoking gun indicator for the presence of organic matter in this mud. And we see that G-band in the Chiava Falls target, and we actually see it in a couple of the other locations that we interrogated around the Bright Angel Formation. And this tells us that we had a rusty red mud that was deposited in the presence of organic matter. So the next question for us was there some reaction occurring between the mud and the organic matter to give rise to those interesting poppy seed and leopard spot textures that we were seeing? So we turned to the other instrument out on the end of the rover's arm called the Pixel instrument. The chemistry of the surface of this rock rendered in three colors, red, green, and blue. And the mixing between colors is telling us something about where elements are present together. The mud itself, which shows up in red, is rich in iron. The things that are purple are rich in the elements iron and phosphorus. And that iron and phosphorus shows up in the poppy seeds and in the rims of those leopard spots. In the places where you can see sort of dull yellow to green tones, that's where iron and sulfur have been combined together in the cores of the leopard spots. And they have been combined into an iron and phosphorus-bearing mineral that we think is vivianite, and an iron and sulfur-bearing mineral that we think is a mineral called greigite. And what's exciting about these finds, this sort of combination of mud and organic matter that has reacted to produce these minerals and these textures, is that when we see features like this in sediment on Earth, these minerals are often the byproduct of microbial metabolisms that are consuming organic matter and making these minerals as a result of those reactions. But there are non-biological ways to make these features that we cannot completely rule out on the basis of the data that we collected with our rover payload. So what we need to do from here is to continue to do additional research in laboratory settings here on Earth, and ultimately bring the sample that we collected from this rock back home to Earth so that we can make the final determination for what process actually gave rise to these fantastic textures.
Perseverance Project scientist Katie Stack-Morgan from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California, says astrobiologists' claims, especially those related to the potential discovery of past extraterrestrial life, requires extraordinary evidence.
The discovery of a potential biosignature or a feature or signature that could be consistent with biological processes but that requires further work and study to confirm a biological origin, grows from years of hard work, dedication, and collaboration between over 1,000 scientists and engineers here at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory and our partner institutions around the country and internationally. Discovery like this comes from years of strategic planning and science analysis from both the rover team as well as the Mars community as we went from the development of the Mars 2020 mission as a concept in response to the priorities of the Planetary Decadal Survey, to the landing site selection, and now to the daily operations of the rover that provide us such a fantastic data set. The Perseverance rover landed in Jezero Crater in 2021, and this site was selected as the result of a multi-year community effort because we decided that this site was truly the best place to accomplish the Mars 2020 mission goals of seeking signs of ancient life on Mars and putting together a collection of rocks for possible return to Earth in the future. Jezero was selected because it's in a location amongst the most ancient terrains on Mars, exposing some of the oldest rocks anywhere in the solar system. And these really ancient rocks provide us a window into a period of time that's not particularly well represented on our own planet Earth, but it's a time when life was emergent on Earth and could have been on Mars as well. Jezero is also indisputably the site of an ancient lake, which we know because we have two river valleys entering into the crater and a river valley exiting the crater through which water flowed out of the crater. During the first 4 years of the mission, Perseverance explored three main geological terrains within the crater. The rover landed on the crater floor, which was a sequence of igneous rocks, including lava flows and igneous cumulus, that had a number of interactions with water and preserved probably micro-environments that were likely habitable. The rover then transitioned to the western fan, a sequence of sedimentary rocks whose sediments were transported from ancient terrains out of the crater into the crater in a relatively long-lived and stable lake, delta, and river setting. The rover then transitioned to what we call the margin unit. This was a thick sequence of igneous rocks that really distinguished themselves by strong orbiter spectroscopic signals of the minerals olivine and carbonate. After the margin unit exploration, the rover had a chance to traverse into the Retva Vallis, which is the main feeder river valley that once fed the ancient lake that was present in Jezero. This river valley, more than 3.5 billion years ago, this valley would have been filled with rushing rivers carrying mud, sand, and gravel from outside the crater into the lake inside the crater. This kind of energetic setting was probably punctuated by periods of calm when water would have backed up, creating a relatively low-energy lake environment where deposition by settling from suspension could have occurred. Eventually, though, this water dried up, the lakes and rivers dried up, and the Bright Angel outcrop was revealed. And this outcrop records for us a potential habitable environment that we can study and the rover can explore on the surface of Mars today. Bright Angel, it's a distinct light-toned outcrop, and its current extent and relief has been exposed to us through billions of years of wind, erosion, and thermal cycling. The rover spent several months exploring this area, ultimately pushing to the northern edge of the channel where the Bright Angel formation met the margin unit. And it's here at the contact, this edge of the river valley, that the rover explored a special target called Chiava Falls. The Chiava Falls rock and those around it show very thin layers. They're often red to tan in color, and they're very fine grained, so the sediment that makes them up is very, very small. This, coupled with the fact that these rocks occur in a river setting, really points to a sedimentary origin here where we had deposition of these sediments in water. Here in this area, we also have some coarser-grained rocks, suggesting that we had a transition from those more energetic river environments to the more calm lake environments. Well, every outcrop on Mars has an interesting story to tell. In order to really understand what makes this particular outcrop so special, we have to get our noses to the outcrop, or in this case, the rover's arm, up close and personal to take a look at all the details of these rocks.
And while abiotic explanations for what's been discovered at Bright Angel are less likely given the paper's findings, they can't be ruled out. NASA research scientist Tori Hula says that any search for life, any test for life for that matter, would be extremely heavily scrutinised by the full scientific community.
We called this the podium test. What would it take for you personally to confidently stand up in front of an international audience and make that claim? And when you put it in that way, I think for a lot of scientists, the bar is really high. So of course there would be obvious things, a very clear signature of technology or a skeleton or something like that. But we think that a lot of the evidence that we might encounter first will be much more subtle. For example, chemical signs of life that have to be detected above a background of abiotic chemistry. And really what we see might depend a lot on where we look. On Mars, for example, the long history of exploration there gives us a lot of context for what we might find. But we're potentially talking about samples that are billions of years old in those cases. And on Earth, those kinds of samples, the evidence of life is often degraded and difficult to detect. On the ocean worlds of our outer solar system, so places like Jupiter's moon Europa and Saturn's moon Enceladus, there's the tantalizing possibility of extant life, meaning life that's still alive. But potentially we're talking about exceedingly small amounts of samples that would have to be analyzed with a relatively limited amount of instrumentation that can be carried from Earth billions of miles away. And then for exoplanets, these are planets beyond our own solar system, really what we're looking for there are very large magnitude signs of life that can be detectable through a telescope from many light years away. So changes like the oxygenation of Earth's atmosphere or changes in surface color. So any one of those things, if they rose to the suspicion of being evidence of life, would be really heavily scrutinized in a very sort of specific and custom way to that particular observation. But I think there are also some general principles that we can follow. And the first is just, are we sure we're seeing what we think we're seeing? Many of these environments are not very well known to us, and so we need to convince ourselves that we're actually seeing a clear signal that represents what we think it represents. Carl Sagan once said, life is the hypothesis of last resort, meaning that we ought to work hard for such a claim to rule out alternative possibilities. So what are those possibilities? One is contamination. The spacecraft and the instruments that we use to look for evidence of life are built in an environment, Earth, that is full of life. And so we need to convince ourselves that what we're seeing is not evidence of our own life, but evidence of indigenous life. If that's the case, we should ask, should life of the type we're seeing live there? And finally, we need to ask, is there any other way than life to make that thing? Any of the possible abiotic processes that we know, and even the ones that we don't know. And as you can imagine, that will be quite a challenge. Once we have a piece of evidence in hand that we really do think represents evidence of life, now we can begin to develop hypotheses. For example, do we have separate independent lines of evidence that corroborate what we've seen and increase our confidence of life? Ultimately, all of this has to be looked at hard by the entire scientific community. And in that sense, I think the really operative word in our question is we. What does it take to say we found evidence of life? Because really the answer, I think, depends on the full scientific community scrutinizing and skepticizing this observation to finally say that we, scientists, we as a community, and we as humanity found life.
That's NASA research scientist Dr. Toria Hurler, and this is SpaceTime. Still to come, an atmosphere discovered on the frozen distant world of Makemake, and a total lunar eclipse wows half the world. All that and more still to come on SpaceTime.
I bet you've probably been to the doctor's office in the past few months. I bet you had to hand over personal info, like your insurance, your ID, maybe even your social security number. And I bet you weren't thinking about how your doctor is just one of many places that has your personal information. If any one of them isn't careful, it's a good bet they could accidentally expose your details to hackers and identity theft, putting you at risk. Fortunately, LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats to your identity. If your identity is stolen, a LifeLock US-based restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed or your money back, with plans covering up to $3 million for stolen funds and expenses. Don't take chances with your personal info. Help protect it even when it's out of your hands. Save up to 40% your first year with promo code iHeart. Call 1-800-LifeLock and use promo code iHeart, or go to lifelock.com/iHeart for 40% off. Terms apply.
I've got Dan Morgan here on the pod. Say hi, Dan.
Hey, how's it going today?
It's going good, man. Tell us who you are and what you do.
I'm Dan Morgan. I'm an attorney and a managing partner at Morgan & Morgan, which is America's largest injury law firm.
That's pretty awesome. I think I saw a billboard of yours recently that said 20 billion won. 20 billion is an insane number.
Yeah, 20 billion recovered. It's actually, I think, somewhere north, probably closer to 22, 23 after this year. And each year we get bigger and badder and our army grows. So the number will hopefully keep getting bigger and bigger as time goes on.
Awesome. So how does someone get in contact with Morgan & Morgan? What would I do if I got into an accident?
Probably the easiest way is dialing pound law. That's pound 529 from your cell phone. We are always open. Our call center is always waiting to take your call. 24/7, 365.
Wow. Dan Morgan from Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm. Thanks for coming by the show.
Thanks for having me.
Visit forthepeople.com for an office near you.
Indications of a methane gas atmosphere have been detected on the distant dwarf planet Makemake in the dark outer reaches of the solar system. The findings, reported in the Astrophysical Journal Letters and on the pre-press physics website archive.org, could indicate a tenuous atmosphere called an exosphere, or it could mean cryovolcanic activity on this distant frozen world. Makemake is one of the largest of the so-called classical population of Kuiper Belt objects. It has a diameter of around 1,430 kilometres, making it about two-thirds the size of Pluto, the largest known Kuiper Belt object. The Kuiper Belt is a ring of frozen worlds, comets and icy debris circling the Sun beyond the orbit of Neptune, the most distant known planet in our solar system. Makemake has one known moon. The dwarf planet's extremely cold, with an average surface temperature of around minus 230 degrees Celsius. And its surface is covered with methane, ethane, and possibly nitrogen ices. But it also shows signs of geothermal activity, and so may be capable of supporting active geology, and maybe even harbouring a subsurface ocean. The dwarf planet was first discovered back on March 31st, 2005, and was initially catalogued as 2005 FY9. Later it was named Makemake after a creator god in the Rapa Nui mythology of Easter Island by the International Astronomical Union. The new findings of a methane exosphere were made using NASA's Webb Space Telescope, and it makes Makemake only the second trans-Neptunian object after Pluto where the presence of gases has been confirmed. The study's lead author, Sylvia Protopapa from the Southwest Research Institute, says the detection of methane in a gaseous form on Makemake makes this world even more fascinating. It shows that Makemake isn't an inactive remnant of the outer solar system, but instead a dynamic body where methane ices are still evolving. The observed methane spectral emission is being interpreted as solar-excited fluorescence, in other words, the re-emission of sunlight absorbed by methane molecules. Protopapa says it could indicate a tenuous atmosphere in equilibrium with surface ices, similar to what Pluto has. Or it could be a more transient activity, such as cometary-like sublimation or cryovolcanic plumes. Both scenarios are physically plausible, and both are consistent with the current data, given the level of noise and limited spectral resolution in the measurements. Makemake has long been a source of scientific intrigue. Stellar occultations suggest that it lacked a substantial surface atmosphere, although a thin one couldn't be ruled out. Meanwhile, infrared data of Makemake, including the Webb measurements, hinted at puzzling thermal anomalies and unusual characteristics of its methane ice, which raised the possibility of localized hotspots across its surface and potential outgassing. Future Webb observations using higher spectral resolution will help determine whether the methane arises from a thin bound atmosphere or from plume-like outgassing. The authors say their best models point to a surface pressure of only about 10 picobars, that is around 100 billion times below Earth's surface atmospheric pressure at sea level, and also 1 million times more tenuous than the atmosphere of Pluto. Now, if this scenario is confirmed, Makemake would join a small handful of outer solar system bodies where surface atmosphere exchanges are still active today. Protopapa says another possibility is that the methane's being released in plume-like outbursts. Now, in this scenario, the models suggest that methane could be released at a rate of around a few hundred kilograms a second, and that's comparable with the vigorous water plumes seen on the Saturnian ice moon Enceladus, and far greater than the faint vapour seen at Ceres. Either way, the new findings offer fresh insights into the behaviour of volatile-rich surfaces across the distant trans-Neptunian region. This is SpaceTime. Still to come, a total lunar eclipse wows half the world, and later in the Science Report, the latest check-up of Australia's sexual health. All that and more still to come on SpaceTime. Well, if you're in parts of Australia, Europe, Africa or Asia, you may have been lucky enough to experience a front row seat for what was a spectacular total lunar eclipse. The event, which was the second this year, saw Earth's shadow obscure the full moon, turning it blood red. The entire spectacle evolved over some 5 hours, starting with a first dusky bite of the moon, and totality lasting a full hour and 22 minutes. The event was a prelude to a partial solar eclipse which will be visible this week from New Zealand, a sliver of the Australian Pacific coast, numerous South Pacific islands, and parts of Antarctica. So exactly what is a total lunar eclipse and how does it happen? Well, it can only occur when the Sun, Earth and full moon align. During this event, the moon passes completely through the Earth's dark shadow, known as the umbra. Now, even though Earth completely blocks sunlight from directly reaching the surface of the moon is still visible. It gradually gets darker and then takes on a rusty or blood-red colour as light from the Sun refracts through Earth's atmosphere and undergoes Rayleigh scattering, leaving only the longer red wavelengths of light. Think of it as all the Earth's sunrises and sunsets happening at once, and then indirectly being reflected onto the lunar surface. Now, a total lunar eclipse can also look orange, yellow, or even brown in colour, depending on how different types of dust particles and clouds in Earth's atmosphere allow different wavelengths of light to reach the lunar surface. Partial lunar eclipses happen when only parts of the moon's surface is obscured by the Earth's umbra. Then there are penumbral lunar eclipses. They happen when the moon only travels through the faint penumbral or outer portion of Earth's shadow. Now, a lunar eclipse is different from solar eclipses, which happen when the moon's orbit lines up so that it passes directly between the Earth and the Sun. They can only happen on new moon. Whatever the event, it's a spectacular display of orbital mechanics at work. This is SpaceTime.
I bet you've probably been to the doctor's office in the past few months. I bet you had to hand over personal info, like your insurance, your ID, maybe even your social security number. And I bet you weren't thinking about how your doctor is just one of many places that has your personal information. If any one of them isn't careful, it's a good bet they could accidentally expose your details to hackers and identity theft, putting you at risk. Fortunately, LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats to your identity. If your identity is stolen, a LifeLock US-based restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed or your money back, with plans covering up to $3 million for stolen funds and expenses. Don't take chances with your personal info. Help protect it even when it's out of your hands. Save up to 40% your first year with promo code iHeart. Call 1-800-LifeLock and use promo code iHeart or go to lifelock.com/iHeart for 40% off. Terms apply.
I've got Dan Morgan here on the pod. Say hi, Dan.
Hey, how's it going today?
It's going good, man. Tell us who you are and what you do.
I'm Dan Morgan. I'm an attorney and a managing partner at Morgan & Morgan, which is America's largest injury law firm.
That's pretty awesome. I think I saw a billboard of yours recently that said 20 billion won. 20 billion is an insane number.
Yeah, 20 billion recovered. It's actually, I think, somewhere north, probably closer to 22, 23 after this year. And each year we get bigger and badder and our army grows. So the number will hopefully keep getting bigger and bigger as time goes on.
Awesome. So how does someone get in contact with Morgan & Morgan? What would I do if I got into an accident?
Probably the easiest way is dialing pound law. That's pound 529 from your cell phone. We are always open. Our call center is always waiting to take your call. 24/7, 365.
Wow. Dan Morgan from Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm. Thanks for coming by the show.
Thanks for having me.
Visit forthepeople.com for an office near you.
And time now to take a brief look at some of the other stories making news in science this week with the Science Report. A new study suggests that a quarter of recent heat waves would have been virtually impossible without man-made climate change. The findings, reported in the journal Nature, are based on 213 heatwave events between the year 2000 and 2023. Researchers assessing the impact of climate change examined data from 180 of the biggest carbon emitters. These are industries or processes which contributed some 50% of the total increase in heatwave intensity. Well, the latest check-up of Australia's sexual health has been released, and it's found that over the past decade, syphilis diagnoses in Australia have almost doubled, gonorrhea has more than tripled, and chlamydia diagnoses remain high. But there is some good news. It seems HIV/AIDS infection has declined. The new national surveillance data findings were presented at the Australasian HIV and AIDS conference in Adelaide by the Kirby Institute at the University of New South Wales. However, the study isn't complete. Researchers say they found significant gaps in sexual health testing among the Australian population. So we're really not getting a full picture of what's happening everywhere. The Australian Navy will spend $1.7 billion on a new squadron of 12 autonomous unmanned Ghost Shark submarines. The new attack drones will start entering service next year, undertaking intelligence-gathering surveillance, reconnaissance and strike operations. The Department of Defence says the new Ghost Shark XL AUVs will provide stealthy, long-range clandestine undersea warfare capabilities. The 6-metre-long vessels are designed to be launched either from onshore facilities or from motherships at sea. Across the world, honest journalists have died putting truth to power. Yet corrupt journalists proudly present their biased, unbalanced and dishonest reports as factual news. News reporting should be based purely on the facts, without any editorialising or personal opinions. Those who include their own views in what should be a straightforward news story are corrupt and have no credibility. There are many once great news organisations that are now little more than sheltered workshops full of arrogant, virtue-signalling, self-important liars, pushing their opinions not as the editorials they should be, but as news. And that's dishonest and corrupt. But as Tim Mindham from Australian Skeptics points out, then there are those journalists who just leave you stunned with their low level of understanding of what the very craft of journalism's all about.
There are times when you, as a journalist, and you see some stories in there that you just make you despair, right? Of journalistic effort and research should not be to take someone's press release and reprint it as fact. But there's a story that appeared recently in an Australian newspaper, online certainly, about an exorcist. This story is just a promo piece. The journalist allowing her to just say anything at all, and there's no questioning, there's no research, there's no critical thinking applied to this story at all, including down to the fact that over the last 20 years of her career, she's cleared over 5,000 homes of ghosts, spirits. Now, that normally is actually sort of like one exorcism every working day, which must make her pretty busy, although I actually got in touch with a journalist and said, how does she do that? And he said, she's recently cut it down to 2 per week, which makes it in the first half of the career a hell of a lot busier to actually do all these exorcisms. I think it's one of those figures, to me, it sounds like it's made up, but who knows? Maybe she got a list, but she's treated billionaires and others.
Does she run around the place yelling, "The power of Christ commands you"? What does she do?
We throw a bit of water around and therefore it makes it sort of sound good. The trouble is there's no evidence for what she says. It's just her say-so. And I find there's more of a concern not that these exorcists exist. They do, whether they're official Catholic Church exorcists or whether they're just professionals who go around doing this sort of stuff. Disappointing it happens. It's just as disappointing when you see a newspaper report, which is basically a press release, a puff piece for a particular practitioner, which gives her a lot of publicity, probably gives her some credibility if it appears in a decent paper.
How many times have you and I spoken about the quality of journalism these days?
Yeah. I know what you're thinking, and I will say the same thing. When you've seen journalistic practices, you see what it's based on. Most journalists, you would hope, are decent people trying to do a decent story. They're perhaps under pretty severe restrictions these days as they're asked to do more stuff with fewer people. But when you see this sort of thing, okay, fill space. If someone just sends you a lot of blurb and you do a cheap and cheerful interview with someone, and then you publish it, you've just written up your 1,000 words requirements for a story, and no one seems to care that it may not be true. But just for a matter of interest, what this exorcist says, how to keep spirits out of your home. You burn essential oils. I've heard people who sell essential oils not know what they mean by essential oils. They think it's necessary oils, but it's essences, not essential, not necessary. Play calm music. Don't know what the music is. Don't know what calm is to you.
Barry Manilow rather than Deep Purple.
Yeah. You have to open your windows. I've got no idea what difference that makes, apart from the wind sort of blowing a spirit away.
That will get rid of some of the spirits anyway.
And declutter regularly. Most of this sounds like good advice just to keep your house clean. Ghost or not. The story is silly, but it's long and it's disappointing that it appears in a recognised newspaper.
That's Tim Mindham from Australian Skeptics. And that's the show for now. SpaceTime is available every Monday, Wednesday and Friday through Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Podcast, Pocket Casts, Spotify, Acast, Amazon Music, Bytes.com, SoundCloud, YouTube, your favourite podcast download provider, and from spacetimewithstuartgary.com. SpaceTime's also broadcast through the National Science Foundation on Science Zone Radio and on both iHeartRadio and TuneIn Radio. And you can help to support our show by visiting the SpaceTime store for a range of promotional merchandising goodies, or by becoming a SpaceTime patron, which gives you access to triple episode commercial-free versions of the show, as well as lots of bonus audio content which doesn't go to air, access to our exclusive Facebook group, and other rewards. Just go to spacetimewithstuartgary.com for full details.
You've been listening to SpaceTime with Stuart Gary. This has been another quality podcast production from Bytes.com.
Chances are you've been to the doctor recently, and you probably handed over your insurance, your ID, and even your social security number. Your doctor is just one of many places that has your personal info, and if any of them accidentally expose your details, you could be at risk for identity theft. LifeLock monitors millions of data points a second. If you become a victim, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year. Call 1-800-LifeLock and use promo code IHEART, or go to lifelock.com/iHeart for 40% off. Terms apply.